In 1938, off the coast of the Eastern Cape in South Africa, an unassuming fishing captain and his crew were in the middle of hauling in an assortment of fish, of which they noticed an unusually large species they had never seen before. This prompted the captain to call upon the director of the local East London Museum, Marjorie Courtney Latimer, who would often identify strange fish even the seasoned fishermen didn't recognize. In this particular case, however, she was stumped, and after taking it away for further examination, she contacted a prominent ichthyologist named Dr. J.L.B. Smith for a second opinion. It was ultimately confirmed that this mystery creature was none other than the coelacanth, a prehistoric fish that was thought to have gone extinct 65 million years ago. You might know it as a great food source in Ark Survival Evolved, but at the time this was a groundbreaking zoological discovery. The fish itself measured nearly 5 feet long, weighed 57.5 kilograms, and displayed the characteristic lobed fins that this species is known for, a trait often recognized as the foundation for all modern-day tetrapods. It was, and still is, by all accounts, a true living fossil. Like Congress. Ms. Courtney Latimer would then go on to become an honorary member of the International Society of Cryptozoology since its founding in 1982. This account of a frankly insane rediscovery begs the question: what other species could be hiding out there that we still haven't found? From the recently extinct, rumored to still exist, to reports of dinosaurs dwelling deep in the jungles of the Congo, today we will be exploring a variety of prehistoric cryptids from all around the world. Some you may have heard of, and others I didn't even know about prior to making this video. So without further ado, let's grab our binoculars, put on our tinfoil hats, and dive right in. More commonly known as the Tasmanian tiger, the Thylacine was a large carnivorous marsupial that inhabited Australia, New Guinea, and Tasmania. The animal is thought to have first appeared in its modern form around 4 million years ago according to the fossil record, and was the dominant predator in its region, weighing an average of about 25 kilograms and possessing the uncanny ability to open their jaws to a nearly 90-degree angle. Sailors first reported having seen what they described as a tiger-like creature in the early 1800s, around 6 feet long, with stripes running transversely down its lower body. However, human and thylacine interaction more than likely began far before these English settlers first arrived to Tasmania, as cave paintings of the animal have been found in several locations across Australia. The first detailed description of the animal was given by a Governor William Patterson in 1805 after a pack of dogs had killed a specimen. It famously reads, "The form of the animal is that of a hyena, at the same time strongly reminding the observer of the appearance of a low wolf dog." And then he probably went to Outback Steakhouse or something. Upon their arrival to Tasmania, the English quickly realized that seeing a thylacine was rare, suggesting they may have already been in decline prior to the interference of humans, as studies show that the animal had already been extinct in Australia and New Guinea for about 3,000 years. This is thought to have been a result of increased competition following the introduction of the dingo, but regardless of the cause, it would only serve as a warning for what was to come. Unfortunately, the English began to hunt and kill the thylacine in fear that it would begin to predate on their livestock, primarily their sheep, and numbers began to dwindle. This, along with the destruction of their habitat, would ultimately lead to a few remaining specimens, the last of which, a female, died in captivity at Beaumaris Zoo in 1936, a mere 2 months after the animal was officially granted protection status. The thylacine was officially declared extinct in 1986 after 50 years of not a single confirmed sighting. It's at this point that you're probably wanting to ask, Kingfisher, this isn't a cryptid, it's just an animal that recently went extinct. We know it was real. Where's the mystery? And to that I say, I can't really hear you through the screen. A cryptid is defined as a creature who is suspected or claimed to exist, but whose existence itself has yet to be confirmed. In the case of something like the thylacine, you'd normally be right to assume it doesn't fit that description and is, therefore, not really a cryptid. That is, of course, if it weren't for the slew of sightings that have been reported throughout Tasmania post-extinction. Thousands of unconfirmed eyewitness accounts have occurred in the past several decades, some much more reliable than others. Oftentimes, these events are chalked up to a case of mistaken identity, as invasive Eurasian foxes and Tasmanian patamelons would logically be the culprit for any wandering eyes purposefully searching for something in those woods. However, some witnesses are very adamant about having seen the trademark black stripes on the lower end of the body and a characteristically large head. Supposed photos of the animal have been taken as well, with new ones tending to pop up every so often, prompting a short-lived response from many internet reactionaries. Just 4 months ago, Forrest Gallant made a video detailing the story of how a man named Henry received photos from a friend showing what appears to be a Tasmanian tiger, who, following encrypted fashion, is incredibly blurry and out of focus. Yeah, that's That's a cryptid, alright. These photos, while admittedly very intriguing, unfortunately turned out to be yet another hoax, much like many others before them. And Henry himself was a sketchy individual, but that's another conversation. The island of Tasmania itself, while not unusually large, is very remote, with humans only inhabiting a select few areas and the rest of it being wilderness. The idea of a reclusive population of thylacines that managed to elude capture at the hands of humans, while definitely unlikely, is not within the realm of impossibility. Unfortunately, no sightings have been confirmed, and as of right now, it continues to remain a mystery. But who knows? Maybe one day through rediscovery or genetic engineering, we might just have a chance at seeing this magnificent creature once again. In the Scottish Highlands, there dwells a creature of legend, not on land, but instead deep beneath the frigid waters of Lake Loch Ness. The Loch Ness Monster, or more lovingly known as Nessie, is an aquatic reptile with a characteristically long neck, flippers or stumps on the sides of its body, and several humps running down its back. In its modern interpretations, it's very much described as a plesiosaur, a group of fully aquatic reptiles, not dinosaurs, that went extinct 66 million years ago after Big Space Rock Go Boom. The earliest recorded account of the creature dates back to the year 564, when an Irish monk by the name of Saint Columba supposedly banished a so-called water demon with a feline-like body in order to rescue one of his companions from being eaten at the mouth of the River Ness. According to the 7th century book, The Life of Saint Columba, written by Saint Adamnan, the monk basically sign language the cross, commanded go no further, nor touch the man, go back with all speed, and old Nessie was just nice enough to listen. We'll get back to this account because there are a bunch of glaring issues with this book, but regardless, later stories of the monster were also quite unusual. In 1933, on July 22nd, a Mr. and Mrs. George Spicer were driving back home near the famed lake after a vacation, when they noticed a dark object on the road in front of them. They described what appeared to be an extended appendage that was sort of undulating across the street connected to a larger, rounder body. They observed in terror as it made its way across the road and into the water below. This was the first account of Nessie traversing outside of the water that the broader public was made aware of. However, the first report of what we now know as the plesiosaur monster came the very next year after a veterinary student named Arthur Grant was driving at 1 a.m. on his motorbike, when he saw what he described as an animal with a long neck, a small head, flippers, and a tail bolt across the road in front of his headlights before vanishing into the lake. Since then, hundreds of sightings have been recorded in and around the legendary Loch Ness, with several photos even surfacing, you get it, every so often, such as the infamous surgeon's photograph taken by Robert Kenneth Wilson, the most recognizable piece of Nessie lore that exists. Besides Scooby-Doo and the Loch Ness Monster, of course. Having been originally published in 1934 by the Daily Mail, critics were skeptical of the photo, and ultimately their skepticism paid off when, years later, in 1994, it was confirmed that it had been faked. This seems like a good time to mention there are a lot of other sightings that I am not going over for the sake of time, ranging from a giant camel to an enormous otter, but if you're interested, check out Trey the Explainer's video about Nessie. He has a whole series on the monster. The videos are very well written and very well researched. They helped me a lot when I was making this one, so if you'd like an even deeper dive into the Loch Ness Monster, I highly recommend checking them out. The monster's true identity has been a subject of debate for decades now, with several theories attempting to provide a possible explanation. Some propose an isolated group of plesiosaurs somehow evaded extinction by making their way inland through the River Ness and settling down in the lake, establishing a contained population. Some have even theorized that it could be some sort of gigantic leech or a form of lamprey. However, the most accepted theory appears to be a case of simple misidentification or just a slew of hoaxes drummed up for sensationalist and tourism purposes. You see, a lot of the accounts I previously mentioned have several plesiosaur-sized holes in them once you truly begin to dissect. For example, Saint Columba's original encounter with the monster was documented by a relative of his, Saint Adamnan, and several of Columba's companions that he would travel throughout Scotland with. The reason these reports are less than reliable is because, well, the entire book is just him and his friends glazing him. Like, religious glaze, it's crazy. There's even a separate account where Columba supposedly, and I quote, destroyed a wild boar after praying to it because he was a wizard, I guess. As well as, you know, performing miracles, raising the dead, stopping entire storms, usual Celtic monk activities. Needless to say, it isn't a good source, and unfortunately neither is the Spicer story, as the couple admits to having watched the original King Kong movie prior to having seen the monster, which, unsurprisingly, would have blown their minds and primed their imaginations to stretch the truth for whatever it was they really saw that day. As time went on and sightings compiled, eventually the modern plesiosaur interpretation was formed, but even then, the existence of such a creature would defy nature and the fossil record as we know it. Plesiosaurs went extinct along with all non-avian dinosaurs 66 million years ago with no chance of survival. The idea of an isolated population hiding out in this cold lake is frankly impossible. Nearly. 99.9%. And that's where the misidentification comes in. See, a detail that is often overlooked when discussing these supposed sightings is that, Loch Ness is very foggy. The relative warmth of the water in relation to the air surrounding it often creates a thick layer of fog that obscures vision, creating the possibility for even a fish to be misconstrued as some mythical being. Additionally, Loch Ness is home to many interesting animals that could all theoretically serve as explanations for what people have seen. Otters, deer, salmon, and even seals that occasionally visit from the open ocean are not uncommon sights. The lake is also ridden with giant European eels that could grow up to 7 feet long and weigh a horrifying 72 kilograms. I'd argue that that in itself is enough of a monster. Nowadays, Nessie has inspired a Navy fleet-sized number of aquatic cryptids all over the world, including our very own Champy here in the good old US of A, and lured countless visitors to the shores of Loch Ness in hopes of catching a glimpse, generating millions in annual revenue as a result of the tourism. And with the lake itself being around 230 meters deep, it isn't difficult to understand why such an animal has captivated people's imaginations for so long. In the realm of paleontology, sauropods are known as a clade of dinosaurs easily identifiable by their long necks, comedically large girth, and the ability to projectile vomit with enough force to kill a human. I'm serious. They roamed the Earth for over 100 million years until their inevitable demise with the rest of the dinosaurs. So then, why is it that the Bantu peoples of South Africa have reported sightings of a large, slow-moving quadrupedal animal with a long neck and a small head? Mokele-mbembe is a creature that has been reported to dwell in and around the Congo River basin with descriptions that are scarily accurate to ye old sauropods from the funny black and white times. It is known as a neo-dinosaur, a subset of cryptids with traits similar to that of the infamous prehistoric creatures. While the name Mokele-mbembe itself is a broad statement that is often used by the natives to refer to many prehistoric cryptids in the area, I want to specifically focus on the sauropod as it is the most recognizable of the bunch. It is unknown when this creature was first spotted, as legends passed down by word of mouth from the natives report stories dating back centuries, sometimes describing it as a living animal, and in other cases referring to it as a spirit lurking in the river. There are even accounts of the locals being shown sketches of brontosaurs and diplodocus before confirming that they are indeed the creature in question. The first written account of the animal, however, was from a German captain named
Ludwig Freiherr von Stein zu Lausnitz.
He reports having spoken to locals while on an expedition to survey early German colonies, who relayed their stories of an enormous herbivorous creature that would attack all boats that would come near it, killing everyone on board but refusing to eat them. He was even shown a trail that Mokele would supposedly use in its trek for food. Unfortunately, the path was littered with footprints of elephants and other large herbivores in the area, making it difficult to distinguish anything truly unique. While they were, of course, just stories, Ludwig's account quickly garnered the attention of the media in the West, as America was experiencing a bit of a dinosaur boom at that time, and many people were immediately hooked. You see, Ludwig's account was informally published by the author Willy Ley in the book The Lungfish and the Unicorn in 1941. During that time, many people in the US held the belief that Africa was still basically stuck in the Stone Age, that it was this prehistoric window into the past with a slightly racist belief that its human inhabitants hadn't progressed either. And trust me, I don't throw that word around all willy-nilly. So it isn't surprising that some people may have indeed believed these stories of a dinosaur living deep in the jungle, a remnant of a world long gone, with that concept further appropriated by works such as The Lost World and King Kong. Of course, this honeymoon phase would, in time, pass, and the truth of Mokele-mbembe would be revealed. Pretty soon, a series of questionable expeditions were performed by explorers seeking to prove the existence of the sauropod. The reason I call them questionable is because a lot of these seem to be bunk. For example, possibly the most famous of these missions was conducted by explorer Henry Powell and biologist Ray Mackall. Right off the bat, we start to see huge issues when truly diving into the specifics. First off, Mackall's training was in virology, which does not at all qualify him to search for a literal dinosaur in a place as inhospitable as the Congo. Additionally, this dude was like the cherry picker of all cherry pickers. He basically only accepted interviews from natives who supported the existence of Mokele, but ignored pretty much anyone else who would deny the existence of the animal. In some instances, even pressuring the natives into providing an account of the monster, whether it was fabricated or not. This, as unfortunate as it is, pretty much discredits the entire thing, regardless of the original scientific intentions that Mako claims he had for the trip. Some voyages were headed by another subset of interesting individuals who took an interest in Mokele, that being young Earth creationists, or those who believe the planet is no more than 10,000 years old. They argue that the dinosaurs came to be on the 6th day of creation when God created the animals and humans of Earth. According to the lore, they weren't allowed to be on Noah's Ark prior to the Great Flood. I guess they had beef or something. Of course, when told about the true age of fossils as represented by scientific research and radiometric dating, creationists will just say, and I quote, "Nuh-uh," because the way we date fossils is incorrect, I guess. And in the same breath, they'd argue that a firmament exists around the Earth. Yeah. Good. So why is Mokele so important to them? Well, the existence of a dinosaur would basically prove them correct by proxy of disproving the theory of evolution and completely dismantling the fossil record as we know it. Unsurprisingly, no tangible evidence extending beyond first-hand accounts by natives were ever provided in these expeditions. Instead, I personally believe there is a much simpler reason for why the locals seem to remain adamant about the existence of a dinosaur in the area.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
Think about it. Expeditions are expensive. Visitors in search of the beast would need a native guide, security, a doctor in the case of being afflicted by the cornucopia of diseases that exist over there, a translator, a place to stay, and among other things. These people eventually figured out that if they told the dumb white man about a dinosaur living in the jungle, they'd basically be giving a boatload of cash to entertain them for a few days. Like, they aren't stupid, and contrary to popular belief, they're not exactly uneducated either. The people of the Congo know what a dinosaur is. The drawings I mentioned earlier that they were being shown by these white dudes, yeah, they knew the whole time. They were playing these explorers for saps. That's my belief, anyway. However, you then have to explain the stories passed down through generations prior to the interference of Western explorers. These legends were more than likely folklore that, much like the Loch Ness Monster, could be attributed to misidentification. Elephants, hippopotamus, black rhinoceros, and even okapi are possible explanations for the sightings, with the elephant's trunk being the neck of Mokele, and the okapi's stumps perhaps being the fabled horn. Of course, different interpretations of Mokele-mbembe do exist, such as the description that matches much more with the classic iguanodon. However, the test of time has confirmed that the most infamous version will forever be the long-necked behemoth. Mokele, according to the legends, tends to stay within the jungles of the Congo, hardly ever venturing out into the open. For in the savannah, there supposedly lives a predator of monstrous proportions, known as the Kasai Rex. The animal was first seen by a Swiss hunter named John Johnson on an excursion in 1932 to take down an elephant. Pretty average Tuesday for a rich white guy in those times. After a few days of traveling through swamp and prairie, Johnson and his assistant finally encountered a pair of elephants in an open field. As Johnson was attempting to line up the shot, a creature burst out of the brush not too far from where the pachyderms were grazing. An enormous animal that moved on 2 legs and showed off a deep red color with black stripes. Johnson reports having shot the beast twice, at which point it backed away, giving the hunter and his assistant a chance to escape through the swamp behind them. As they turned to look back, they saw that the animal had killed a rhinoceros, and they were able to capture this picture of the creature. And with that, the legend of the Kasai Rex was born. If this photo is real, then it is very obviously just a large monitor lizard. However, the Rex itself has been described as more of a theropod, reminiscent of a tyrannosaur. Suspending our disbelief for a second and assuming a population of dinosaurs did survive the KT extinction, the animals would more than likely be some sort of a belisaurid or carcharodontosaur, as no tyrannosaur specimens have ever been found in Africa. Not to mention, it being an belisaurid would better line up with the descriptions of the Kasai Rex having strong legs and running down its prey pretty quickly. Some theories and possible explanations suggest that the animal is an enormous unknown species of monitor lizard, which is much more believable than a neo-dinosaur. However, a detail that I believe is important to mention that further questions the validity of these dinosaur sightings is the retrospective descriptions used when talking about them. For example, the Kasai Rex is originally described to have looked like this, which automatically disproves any possibility of legitimacy. Why? Because no theropod looked like that. We now know that that dinosaurs were not these slow-moving, tail-dragging reptiles that stood up so vertically. Theropods especially had horizontal bodies with thick, powerful tails used to balance themselves during locomotion that would hardly ever touch the ground unless they were asleep or resting or something. The same could be said about Mokele-mbembe. Sauropods are no longer thought to have been these mindless, swamp-dwelling beasts with low-hanging heads. Instead, we've since discovered that they did indeed hold their tails high above the ground and stood with a more upright posture. The reason the Kasai Rex and Mokele-mbembe are unfortunately inherently impossible animals is their descriptions are based on what we knew about dinosaurs at the time that they were described. It would have been far more thought-provoking if their original reports matched with what we currently know about these animals, plus some changes to account for evolution throughout 66 million years. This kind of retrospective phenomena is observed with many other saurian cryptids around the world, such as the ropin, a notorious mishmash of attributes from different pterosaurs that would never be biologically possible. That being said, stories of enormous leftovers of the past prowling the jungles and savannas of the Congo, hiding away from any human interference and remaining isolated despite the world moving on without their rule, is inherently interesting to me. Despite their fiction and how fantastical they may sound, they are still truly fascinating and just really cool. However, there is one more cryptid we have left to cover that does make you wonder. So this one is a little interesting because it isn't exactly one singular cryptid, rather it's several different cryptids with descriptions that are very alike that all point to one possibility. The indigenous tribes of South America that dwell within the Amazon share stories of humanoid cave-dwelling creatures prowling the rainforest. The origins of these animals is deeply rooted in the folklore of these tribes, and as far as we know, there doesn't seem to be any singular incident where the stories originated from, unlike the Kasai Rex, Nessie, or even the Mothman. Yes, this is a shameless plug. Please go check out that video. Despite this, however, there seems to be a consensus among these peoples as to what these cryptids are like, forged and hardened through hundreds, possibly thousands of years of oral tradition. The most infamous of these supposed creatures is the Mapinguari, a true monster of legend. Sometimes referred to as the Bigfoot of South America for reasons we'll get into in just a moment, the beast looks a little bit like this. Yeah. Good luck sleeping tonight. There are many descriptions of the Mapinguari, some more mythical than others. Brazilian ornithologist David Oren has famously pieced together more or less the bulk of what several eyewitnesses report, that being a large, strong creature capable of reaching up to 6.5 feet tall when standing on two legs, with long, rough fur that is often described as being reddish-black or dark brown. It is said to sport thick, lengthy claws on its forelimbs and a pungent scent capable of knocking men unconscious. It can walk on both 2 legs and 4, although its gait is said to be a little uneven and quite uncanny when it's bipedal. More fantastical accounts of the Mapinguari that mostly appear in legend and not during eyewitness reports describe it having a fanged mouth on its stomach, one large eye in the center of its forehead making it a cyclops of sorts, and backwards facing feet which could possibly be an explanation for a strange way of walking. Despite its size, some tribes do report it can be scarily fast and agile when necessary. Oh, and did I mention it's bulletproof? Yeah, according to some hunters who claim to have shot at some specimens, it can only be damaged by a large shotgun slug either to the head or abdomen. The damn thing is borderline Based on all of these characteristics, one would not be wrong to draw comparisons between this large, hairy South American cryptid and our very own Bigfoot. Hell, the Mapinguari is even considered a guardian of the forest in some cultures, similar to how Bigfoot has become a sort of caretaker of the American woods. Normally, a legend like this, while very interesting for sure, would not make me think twice about it. That is, until you begin to cross-reference the descriptions of the Mapinguari with that of monsters from other nations within the Amazon. The Machiguenga, for example, tells stories of an aggressive beast known as the Segamai, described as having matted red fur and being approximately the size of a cow. It too is bulletproof, can walk quadrupedally and bipedally, possesses a deathly powerful stench, and make their homes in deep caves. Additionally, they are said to possess the claws and strength that are often associated with the Mapinguari. The Kida Harada is yet another creature with this exact same description. Long fur, strong arms, claws, a noxious odor, cave dweller, and the whole kit and caboodle. There are more examples that I could go through from several other tribes in South America that I won't explain for the sake of time, but you get the idea. It's very clear that something either exists or once existed that spawned these legends. As for what exactly it can be is the subject of speculation. People have tried to make the argument that spectacled bears could serve as the explanation. However, when the Mapinguari were asked as to whether or not this was possible, they denied it, saying that they know what the Segamai looks like and that it is nothing like a bear. And yes, they know what a bear is. The thought of apes or some sort of primate has also been floated around. However, the largest of the New World monkeys in South America include howler monkeys, and even the biggest ones are still only a fraction of the size of a human, not the 6 or even 10 feet in height that some legends suggest. Instead, there is another animal that people often point the finger to, which I don't think is very much ridiculous to believe: the giant ground sloth. Now, while I don't think that there is a hidden extant population of ground sloths currently hiding in the caves of the Amazon, I don't think it's ludicrous to suggest that giant ground sloths may have survived far longer than we think. After all, even in the big 2025, the Amazon rainforest remains largely unexplored, with enormous pockets of unknown flora and fauna just waiting to be discovered. If ever there was a place for giant ground sloths to have made their home following the end of the Pleistocene, it would have been here. Additionally, here is a map of more or less the area that the Amazon extends to in the modern day, and here is one of the predicted range that Megatherium, the largest known species of ground sloth, may have inhabited during its lifetime. Oh, and here's another that shows the possible range of another species, Scelidotherium. An interesting thing I feel is worth noting is that, remember earlier when I mentioned the Mapinguari is known for its backwards facing feet? Well, perhaps this could have something to do with the inward facing hands of several sloth species when walking on all fours. I want to be clear, I am not suggesting that there are actually living, breathing sloths dwelling in the Amazon. I'm simply saying it's a little freaky that several indigenous cultures living in the same general geographical area but still separate from one another tell stories dating back hundreds of years describing a large, foul-smelling mammalian creature with long claws, reddish-brown fur that also happens to be to bullets unless shot in the head. It is 100% something that would leave anybody having second thoughts. If you made it to the end of the video, I'd like to give you my personal thanks for checking out my content. This was a far cry from what I usually upload on this channel, and it is ultimately what I would like to transition to at some point in time. If you enjoyed and would like to see more, I'd encourage you to like and subscribe to the channel. I also want to give a huge shout out to my good friend 22 Crafting Tables for his help in making this video. He's the incredibly talented artist who mocked up all of these awesome illustrations for the animals I talked about today. If you want to see some more of his stuff, I'll leave a link to his socials in the description. His art is amazing, and go support the homie. Thank you all again so much for watching the video, and I hope to see you all next time. Bye bye.